Hey guys, again, Assalamualaikum and very good morning. Welcome back to EMG 4902, where we learn about research methodologies. Okay, and at the end of the course, okay, again, I iterate this again. One of the major things that you guys are expected to learn is how you guys can plan for your research. Okay, and this is talking about your FYP later on, which for most of you, I guess, you will take in the next semester, right? So for now, okay, we are at week 6, right? And the topic for today is actually something that we should have covered last week, but no worries, it's still within the plan. Okay, so this is actually about research design. So research design is, I would say, it's quite a heavy topic for me. I'm not sure about you guys, but essentially it's because we, in the, the research design stage is where you plan basically what you are going to do for the rest of your research. Okay, so it involves a lot of thinking. So you have to actually compare and you have to check back, like what exactly are you going to do? Okay, so a lot of it involves planning. Yeah. So anyway, before we go any further, I just want to remind you that the first assessment, okay, assessment 1 is due this Friday, right? And if you have any problems, please don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, so I can see from the Google form, okay, within those who had already filled that up would notice that there's a question, okay, with regards to your proposal. So I see that the majority right now is, you guys are evenly distributed, I would say. Okay, but this is only based on the first few who had already submitted. Okay, but some of you are still at the topic or title, right? So don't worry, so at least you are, heading into the direction. Okay, so far, any of you still haven't started? Dia tak? Okay, so that's a good thing. Yeah, so don't worry, editing, you guys can, email or WhatsApp me if you need, more immediate feedback with regards to your title, but it's okay. We'll move along, as time permits. Okay, so anyway, for today, we are looking at research design. Okay, and before we go specifically into that, it would be good if we can look at an overview of a research process. So this is the whole value chain, people say. This is the whole route that you guys will need to go into, starting from this course until the FYP later on. Okay, so but basically for now, for this course only, okay, you will start from here, right? And you will stop here because actually the course ends until you write up your research proposal. So if you notice that one there, okay. However, your FYP later on, okay, it depends. If you are proceeding with the title that you've chosen for your proposal, you can, immediately start with collecting data. Okay, you can collect your data, you process your data, and, during the processing, there's a lot of things to be considered, okay, which relates back to the research design here actually. Okay, that is related to processing data and also collecting data, right? So, okay, And lastly, writing a research report. So here is actually your dissertation. Okay, this is your thesis, which is your research report. Okay, so I won't cover that. We will only look at the 5 here. Okay, so of course, the first thing is first, formulate a research problem. So this is what I mentioned before. When you are thinking about what you are going to do for your FYP, okay, for your research, so on and so forth, it's prudent, it's better to start with what are the problems around you that you want to solve. Okay, is it really a problem? Who is involved? You know, who is the actual beneficiary? You know, things like that will help you to think about, okay, what comes next. So there are many ways to look at research problems. So you can actually find one by reviewing the literature. Okay, you search around, okay, and you actually see, oh, okay, this topic actually, a lot of people are interested. Why? Because it's an enduring problem. So many research has been done, but the problem still exists. Okay, so that could be one of your justification why you want to do that subject, why you want to study that. Okay, so you can start with that, right? But basically, the highlight is the research problem. Okay, so from there, you can actually see, again, what is the link towards what is around you. Okay, that's one thing. That is one thing. But the next thing is actually you can identify your variables. Okay, we look at that. So we will look into variables later on, right? But I hope you guys still remember. I think you've learned during, at least during high school, right, while you are making lab reports or whatever. Usually, okay, I'm not sure whether this had changed or not, but usually when you do any work in the lab, right, for science or for chemistry, physics, there will be a part where you put in, okay, independent variables. Or people say this SIV, and then we have dependent variables. And you list down what are the variables. So it's exactly like that. Okay, of course, it differs whether if you're doing something in the lab, then it's easy to point out what is the independent and what is the dependent. But if you're working with, you know, if you're working more in social sciences, okay, the lines may become a little bit blurry. Okay, because usually we see what is the situation, and then we try to find what are the causes, right? So what's around you, okay, is it independent or dependent? Have to think about that. It can be, I mean, looking at the specific situation, it can be independent or dependent. Okay, of course, you know, I'm trying to generalize between those who are who will probably do science research and social sciences. Okay, so please stop me, please ask question if you are confused. Okay, because I'm trying to generalize, but for both, I'm sure that you guys are also aware that social sciences and pure sciences have a lot of differences. Okay, but the roadmap, okay, how you are going towards here is the same. Okay, you have to go through all of these stages, right? So the major thing here is you have to know your research problem. So for those who are still struggling about your topic, about your title, take a step back, okay, and think about, okay, what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve? Okay. And then from there, okay, you can conceptualize a research design. Okay, so this is what we are going to look at today, research design. And of course, we will look at the different study designs that are out there. Okay. And here, if you still remember the one in the Google form, okay, I use this word quantitative and qualitative. Okay, so for these are the two major groups in study design. So it can be quantitative or it can be qualitative. However, there are studies, okay, there are research where you have to do both. Okay, and it's called a mixed method. Oops. Sorry about that. It's called a mixed method. So in mixed methods, it's actually a combination of the two. Right? So that is for research design. And then once you already confirm what is your study design or research design, it's the same thing. You can then start looking at the instrument. Okay, an instrument here is specifically for data collection. So data collection is actually the major thing there. Right? And when you say instrument, it doesn't always mean device. Okay, it doesn't always mean, when you have sensors or you go into the field and you bring these portable water quality sensors, for example. Okay, that is an instrument. However, depending on the type of your study design, okay, for example, if you are doing things like survey, okay, in survey, there is an instrument that you use, okay, and because instrument usually people would immediately think about physical devices. However, for example, in survey, okay, the questionnaire is actually an instrument. Okay, so it's basically, when we say instrument, it's something that you use to collect your data. So depending on what that data is, that will tell you what is the instrument that you have to use. Okay, start thinking about that. Yeah, you have your title, kan? You have your title, and that title actually comes from your problem, research problem, okay, problem statement, so on and so forth. You have your title. Okay, and from there, okay, from the problems, okay, you actually know already, okay, what are the things that you want to look at? What is the data that you will collect? So for those who had WhatsApp me before, asking about title, so these are the things that I also highlighted. When you look at your title, okay, it's, my comment might say that it's quite general. Okay, why it's quite general? Because when people are reading the title, they sort of know, okay, I'm doing something on water quality, for example. But I don't know whether the person who are, doing the research, okay, are they doing things, like testing the water in one specific area, or they actually are collecting all the information in the literature, okay, sort of something like a literature review, and then present that, okay, or it could be, maybe instrument code. Maybe they are trying to test, existing instrument against water quality, in Tasik. Okay, the lake behind our department, for example. So that's not in the topic, so I'm not sure. Okay, so when you do your title, right, please try and make sure that you are giving enough information to the one who is reading it. So at least they know, okay, so this probably, okay, water quality, maybe in Sungai Selangor. Okay, and exactly what you want to do is determination of heavy metals concentration, okay, in Sungai Selangor. So you can already see, oh, okay, this person is actually looking at the heavy metals. Okay, and most probably he or she will be doing, an experimental design. Okay, he or she will go into the field, collecting the data, and then analyze, and then got the results. Right? So try and make it more specific like that. It's not asking you to, do not be too specific in a way. For example, when you write them, don't let the title be like three rows. Yeah, you have don't make it too long, basically. Right? So once you know, okay, your title, your problem, you have the data, or what is your data? 1, 2, 3. Okay, how you want to collect the data? How to collect the data? And if it's quantitative, then it most probably will be some kind of device. Okay, but if it's qualitative, it could be other methods as well. Okay, so just throwing this. So the most basic differences would be, in experimental design, usually you have an instrument. Okay, but for qualitative, your instrument would be something like interview question. Okay, or maybe you are observing. Okay, you are doing the observation. You go into the field. Okay, and you take notes, right? That note is the instrument. So it can be anything. So you have to, when I say that research design is quite a challenging topic for me, it's not saying that, it's complicated. It's not that, because the possibilities are endless. You can actually do whatever you want. Okay, but with this course, it's actually hopefully, okay, I can guide you into listing out basically what is your aim, okay, how you are going to get there, okay, what are the things that you need, what would you need for analyzing, so on and so forth. So it's the variability is very large. Okay, there's more than 40 of you here, and 40 of you might do 40 different things. Okay, it can be qualitative, can be quantitative. Some of you might do experiments. Some of you might do survey. Okay, some of you might go through secondary data. We will look at that later on. Okay? So that's why, okay, this is very, very important. It's basically, it's forming the gist of your proposal actually. Okay? And then of course, once you have your, what is your instrument, okay, then you can look at the sampling. Okay, sampling here will relate back to one of the things is the population. Okay, population here doesn't always mean people. Okay, if you are doing field study, you are looking at oil palm plantations. Okay, the oil palm trees are your population. If you are going to the lake, okay, and actually you want to study the fish, that fish is your population. If you're going with the route of survey, you're giving out your questionnaire to your friends. So your friends is your population. Okay, that is one thing that you have to bear in mind. So population can be anything. So if you're working in the lab, or maybe you are cultivating something. With me, because my primary background is on microalgae, so algae is actually this small green stuff. So I'm growing them in my lab. Okay. So my population is the algae. So hope that is clear, right? Once you have all of this, then you are ready to write a full proposal. Okay. Bearing in mind, assessment 1 is actually up until literature review. So it doesn't include your methodology part yet. Okay. However, for the full proposal later on, you will look into methodology. And methodology is where you have to be very careful here. Okay, these are the elements that you have to put in the methodology part. Okay. So far so good. Okay ke? Faham tak?
Okay, Doctor.
Alright, okay, I will speed up. Actually, the material today might be too much. So depending on the time, we will continue later today, the afternoon class. So anyway, now at least I hope you guys, can see, okay, the process in an overview. Now we go specifically towards research design. Okay. So as mentioned before, a research design provides the overall structure of the procedure the researcher follows. Okay. Basically when I say methodology, so what are the procedure? Okay, what are you going to do? What are the data you collect? How you collect that data, right? And how you analyze them. And data analysis. So in simple terms, research design is planning. It's basically, it's your plan. Okay, you have to start thinking about when you do a topic, okay, when you do a research topic, you have to start thinking, yeah, when you want to collect the data, especially if you do something in the field. Okay, do you have the instrument? Okay? Or of course, sometimes you don't actually have it with you right now. Okay, but is it available in the department, for example? You have to start thinking about that. Okay, if it's available, who you have to start talking to? Okay, maybe you are interested in one specific topic and there's a lecturer in the department who is doing that in his or her own research. Okay, that's one way to go about it. You can actually contact the lecturer and ask whether, oh, doctor, do you have this equipment, for example? And then later on, when you do FYP, then you can definitely just start. Rather than you plan here, okay, at this part for the proposal, so beautiful, okay, so perfect, everything is nice. But then you start going to FYP, okay, this one tak ada. You don't have this in the department. Or maybe, the thing is broken, for example. Okay, so on and so forth. And that will give you a lot of headache. Okay. That is why during the planning stage, that is very, very important. Okay. You have to start asking yourself, of course, the first thing is, what is the type of research that you're going to do? Okay. The easiest thing is like in what I've asked before, whether you are going to do quantitative or qualitative. Because there is actually a specific sets of study design that you can work with, right? So once you know already, okay, what is it that you are going to do, okay, you have to start thinking about the analysis. Okay. Analysis, of course, is whether you have the equipment, or you have some sort of software. Yeah, for those who are thinking of doing something like a survey, you have to use SPSS. So that is something that you have to start thinking about. Okay. Of course, kenapa? Why do I mention analyze first? Whereas we should be thinking about what data to collect. Okay, sometimes it's like this. To make it easier, okay, you have to start thinking in terms of the future, because we are planning, right? So you have to think about the future, start thinking about what is already available in terms of equipment and software. You know, those who are probably doing something related to GIS. Okay, you have to start thinking, okay, maybe when I start next SEM, can I access GIS? Would I be able to come back? So on and so forth. Huh? So it's basically giving you an idea. If those things are available, then you start to plan your topic to follow in that line. Remember, you have your problem already, you want to solve, but knowing about the analysis will give you the specific results that you will get. Okay. Then, of course, start thinking about what data to collect, how, when, and where, okay, what procedures to follow. These are all should be in the elements of research design. Right? Now, okay. So why is it so important? I've touched upon this a couple of times before, okay, but of course, the major thing is smooth progress. You want your FYP to be as smooth as possible. You already know, okay, maybe this thing it's not in the department. Okay, if it's not available, then you should start thinking about the alternative. Okay, whereas if you really want to do it, that's fine as well. You have to start thinking about where you might get access to specific things. Okay. Secondly, is yield maximum information with minimal resources. Okay, that's always the way to go, because we are trying to be more productive. People always say, okay, work smart, not work hard. Yeah, that's basically this one. You yield maximum results with minimum resources. And then you have to start thinking also about the validity of your result. Later on, when you do your data, you collect your data, you analyze your data. Okay, how sure are you that the data is correct? Is it valid? Okay, so those validity we will cover as well in the measurement topic. Here we start looking about how you can test actually the validity of your data, right? And then, you know, even from now, because you know this is planning stage, right? So you can already identify inadequacies and flaws before you start the study. You know, at least you know already that this would maybe become a problem. So in your head, you're already aware. And once, if that thing happened, okay, you are not going to be caught unawares. You already know, okay, this is actually expected. So the thing there is that it will lessen your stress. Okay, because you already thought about that and you already start thinking about how you can solve that. Okay, okay, I'll try and go quickly with this one. But basically, here, sorry. Organize your ideas and implementation strategies. Okay, the thing is you have to organize. You have to look at the structure. If you go into the methods chapter of any thesis, you will start looking at, okay, the way they write it is structured. The subtitles are structured. It flows in a way that people can understand. And that's how you have to do that as well. Okay. Now, research design characteristic. Okay. Of course, I mentioned here, it's explain how you will find answers to your research question. Okay. Basically, it's whatever that you decide for your research design, it actually comes from your aims and objectives. So aims and objectives actually comes from your problem statement, the one that I mentioned earlier. Okay, when you know your problem, you know what you want to do to solve that problem. Okay, and if you remember, or if you can still recall from the template that I shared with you, okay, objectives should always be written in the form of to something, to investigate, okay, to study, but it always starts with to. And that gives you the idea, okay, that objectives is something that you want to do. Okay, that's why we say as we list it as to. Right. So when you do your objective, okay, make sure that it's something that you can actually achieve within the time frame that you have. Okay, so start thinking about whether you can achieve that objective within 2 semesters, for example. Because remember, your FYP is for 2 semesters. So you have to start thinking along that line. Okay, start thinking about objective as your promise, basically. You want to do this, you want to do that. And at the end, later on, at the final stage of your FYP, okay, you will have in your thesis conclusion. So in conclusion, you have to mention again, okay, did you achieve your objective? Yeah, so that is in conclusion. Major thing is whether you achieve or not. If you have 2 objectives, for example, you have to mention, okay, objective 1 was achieved by blah, 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 blah. And objective 2, was achieved by blah, 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 blah. So if you ask me, is it possible in the conclusion stage, okay, you don't actually achieve your objective? Yes, that is possible. It is possible that you don't achieve, okay, but there must be a reason. It cannot be that, tak jumpa, no data found. It must be something because error lah. Okay, you have to, within the course of 2 semesters, you have to be able to show, okay, that you already work towards that. However, at the end, you weren't able to achieve the objective because of what? So you have to also explain that in the conclusion. Okay? But usually it's achieved. Okay? Usually it's achieved. But you have to be very careful here. Choose your objective. Okay. Now, when we, based on the objective, you work on the research design. Okay, and I've already characterized this into these 2 steps, the 2 major things, which is first is the data collection, okay, and secondly is your sampling design. Okay. And from there, these 2 you use to develop the instrument. And lastly, of course, this one follows the data collection, but that's not under the proposal. That is what comes later. Right? So again, I reiterate again, you have to be firm with your study design. Okay, what type it is, what are your variables, okay, and that links to your measurement. Okay, how you want to measure the variables. Okay. Sampling strategy just now when mentioned about population. Okay, how you are going to start sampling. Okay, once you collect your data, how you want to analyze them. Okay. And of course, these should also be included, logistical arrangement. Okay. Location, if you're doing something, if you are not from Malaysia and you cannot come back, yeah, so your FYP would probably be something that is accessible to you in your own country. Okay, so you have to start thinking about that. Right, and of course, time frame. Time frame is also something that you have to consider as well. Okay, so when we talk about overall research design, first is type of research. This is what we are going to look at later. Okay, and just very quickly, because I think there's also some confusion about this based on some of you who had contacted me, okay, with regards to data. Okay, so we'll look at this later on, but methods of data collection, just to tell you, okay, at the very basic, there's two types of data. Okay, first is primary data, and secondly is secondary data. So when we say primary, it's something that is collected for the first time. Okay, and secondary data is actually data that are collected and analyzed by someone else. I hope that is clear, okay, because this is very, very important as well. Okay, so anyone can give me an example of primary data? Tengok je from here, collected for the first time. Questionnaire. Okay, questionnaire because you are giving out the questionnaire yourself, okay, and you get the data. So that is collected for the first time, and yes, you're correct, that is the primary data. How about secondary? Collected and analyzed by someone else. Any example?
Census.
Huh?
Census.
Yes, that's correct. So its census data are actually secondary data. Okay, so if you are doing, for example, you are actually doing something survey. Okay, so before you develop that survey, you will usually read up a lot, and you will actually probably get some information about this specific topic from before, okay, from others who have already done it. So the things, the paper, the journals, the books, whatever it is that you reference, those are the source of secondary data. Okay, so just very quick on that. Yeah, of course, type of research, data collection, then sampling design, okay, and statistical design. So these two, although it's here, okay, we will not cover this week. Okay, we will cover that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So, but just be aware that when we talk about research design, it should encompass all of this. All right. Now, example. Okay, so actually I've already explained about this before. Okay, but maybe with the figure, maybe you will understand more. Okay, so basically, like mentioned before, problem discovery. So you look around you. Okay, what are the problems? And maybe you find, okay, this is to help you as well for those who are still struggling about your title. Okay, look around you, you see what are the problems, and maybe you've already shortlisted like 3 things that you are interested in. Okay, so from the 3 things, what you should do or you can do, okay, is doing this exploratory research. People say this, yeah, but it's basically you look at what is already out there. Yeah. So here it says secondary data. Of course, you go into Scopus or Science Direct, or you go to Google Scholar, you type up the keywords that relates to your topic just now. The 3 things that you are probably interested in, but you are not sure which one you are going to proceed with. You start doing a preliminary research about that. You search that up and you see what are the current findings about that topic. Okay. From there, actually, it can help you look at what are the titles that previous research had looked into. Maybe you can do something similar, but always try to think about what will set you different. Okay, what is something that differentiate you with that is already there? And that can actually be anything. Okay, maybe there's a study done in Turkey, for example. Okay, but no one had done that in Malaysia. So maybe that's something that you can do. Okay, however, all of that comes from this stage. Okay, that is when you do your literature actually. This is the preliminary literature. Okay, so you just Google that up and you see, okay, maybe I want to target this topic. Okay, and then once you do that, the preliminary research, you get a lot of info, right? So from that info will help you to define the problem further. Okay, so pay attention. Here is problem definition. Here is problem discovery. So when we say discovery, that is usually something quite general still. Okay, if you are thinking about climate change is very, very big, right? So in climate change, maybe that is something that, okay, I definitely know that I'm interested in climate change. Okay, and then I go on Google or I go on Scopus and I want to look at, maybe something about deforestation. Okay, so from here, I already got the keyword. Okay, and I start to find all the information about this one. Okay, so there are many causes of deforestation, right? And you can either look at the causes or you can look at the effects. Okay, so for example, after looking, okay, maybe I want to actually look at, okay, what are the causes of deforestation in, you have to be specific here, okay, whether in Malaysia, okay, or if you are being very ambitious, you want to look at the world. Okay, this is okay, this is still at the initial part, right? So you want to look at that. So problem definition would probably be something like, what are the causes of deforestation in Malaysia or the world lah, if you want to look at that. Okay, so from here, you actually have a couple of questions that you can start thinking about. Okay, research question. Okay, maybe you want to be very specific now. Okay, you want to actually look at the palm oil industry. Okay, so in research question, you can start asking about what are the palm oil industry doing that links with deforestation, for example. I'm just drawing that up. So you can actually list the question. Okay. Okay, you can list the question. Right? And from the question, you can come up with the specific objectives. Or what usually I do is come up with the objectives first. Okay, because usually I know already what will come later on. Okay, you can start thinking about what are the data that I want to collect. Okay, so that will help me to specify what are the objectives. Okay, so once you have that, you have your research objective, you have a research question, you can go further into the methodology part, okay, which is the research design. So you start thinking about what are the basic research method. Maybe you want to do survey, or maybe you want to do an experiment. Also possible to do observation, yeah, or another alternative is secondary data study. Okay. Recall back what is secondary data, okay? And I think one of you all had also asked me about this one. So for example, in FYP, okay, some of your seniors had opted to do something called a systematic literature review. Okay, so systematic literature review is actually a study where you use or you make use of the existing data or existing literature that is available online. Okay, or it can be available like in books, so on and so forth. But basically it's using secondary data, okay? But you actually had already developed all the same things here. You know what are the problems, okay? And you actually have a specific objective that you want to solve. Okay, but the data comes from literature. So this is different than when you have a literature review chapter in your thesis. It's different. The whole of the thesis is a literature review. However, it has the results and discussion part. Here you actually have results. Why? Because you have objective here. You have things where you list out to study what. Okay, and following the same thing, you will also have results and discussion and also conclusion. Okay. However, for SLR, we call that SLR, by the way. SLR doesn't have literature review because your result is the literature review. Okay. However, guys, this one I'm not sure whether it will be an option for you next semester. Okay, we'll see. Yeah, and perhaps you can also ask the FYP. Okay, how do we call that? Penyelaras. So it's coordinator. So your FYP coordinator for next semester. But so far, I think it won't be an option for next semester. But I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Okay, we'll see how it goes next semester. But basically, coming back into research method, okay, you have many types of basic research method. Okay, survey, experiment, observation, and there are other things as well. Right, and from there, once you know actually what you want to do, okay, you can start looking at the sample design. Sample design is still under research design, and this is we will cover this in the sampling topic. I think it's next week, if I'm not mistaken. I'll check back, so don't worry. So in sampling design, okay, the basic classification is these two. It can either be probability sampling or non-probability sampling. Just to give you an idea, okay, if we look at how you want to make your data valid and reliable, okay, usually you have to go through the probability sampling. Okay, why? Because you want to be able to generalize your findings to a population. Okay, so if the way you choose your sample is non-probability, okay, you cannot generalize the findings of that study to the bigger population. Okay, so don't worry. We will cover this in specifics in the sampling topic. Okay, but just sharing with you at this point, okay, what you should expect for probability and non-probability. Okay, so once you have designed that, it comes towards the next part lah. So data collection, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the basic approach when you develop your methodology. Okay, so now, remember just now I mentioned about quantitative, qualitative, mixed method. Okay, so in quantitative design, okay, is actually it is covered under experimental and non-experimental. Okay, so for those who are doing, who are thinking of doing things in the lab, okay, or you are going to the field, yeah, you might be looking at experimental design, which falls under quantitative. Okay. However, if you're thinking of doing survey, it's a non-experimental, okay, but it is still quantitative. Okay, so don't be confused. Sometimes before I ask people and they actually thought that survey falls under qualitative. That's not true. Okay, once you have survey, you have your data. Okay, that data can actually be measured. That is quantitative. Whereas you also have qualitative design. Okay, qualitative is usually this one, it's listed here. Okay, can be interactive, it can be non-interactive. Okay, interactive is where you start going into together with your sample. So if your sample is the indigenous people, okay, maybe orang asli in orang asal, okay, in Pahang, for example. If you are talking about interactive, you are going there. You are interacting with your sample. Okay. So if it's non-interactive, then you won't interact at all. So you're just looking at, you know, what the historical analysis, maybe, you know, there are some case studies, you are only looking at that. Okay. And lastly, we have mixed methods. Mixed methods is a mixture of both. So you actually, in your study, you are doing qualitative as well as quantitative study. Okay, so that is mixed method. In mixed method, it can be explanatory, exploratory, or triangulation. Okay, and some I see they do all. Okay, so it totally depends on your research design. There's no right or wrong when we start thinking about the research design. Okay, but saying that, there are wrong ways, there are wrong choices as well. So you have endless possibilities, but you have to be correct in choosing the methods. Okay, so for example, if you're doing an experiment, okay, you do your experiment, you go to the lab, okay, you you actually do the experiment. However, the data that you get, you don't actually use any of the data measured in the lab, actually, but you have something like a lab book where you just observe. Okay, you observe today, siapa ni? Today Jenny is coming to the lab. Okay, maybe Ahmad Mushidi is eating in the lab. Is that the correct data for that particular research? No. Okay, hope that is clear. So when I see endless possibilities and there's no right or wrong, okay, it depends on what are your choices. Okay, so I'll put this here, okay, for you. You can always come back and look at this if you're interested. However, this is a very, an overview of the differences between quantitative and qualitative study. Okay. But for me, the easiest thing that you can hold on to, okay, to differentiate the two is in quantitative, it's numbers. Okay, your data is in the form of numbers. Whereas for qualitative study, your data is in the form of words and images. Okay, sit with that. Okay, think about again what sort of data that you will collect. And once you get that data, in what form is that? Are they words? Okay, are they numbers? Okay, and that will help you to choose between quantitative or qualitative. Right? So in quantitative study, there are many ways you can characterize that actually. Okay. So here I use this reference. So it's actually a book, and the way he characterized it, okay, is through these three. So it's 1, 2, 3. So it can be from the number of contacts. Okay. Contacts here does not mean the number of contact numbers. It's not that. Okay. Actually, it's in the form of contact, whether you are making an engagement 1 time, 2 times, or 3 or more. Okay, hope that is clear. This is not number of people, not mobile number of your friends. If you have 3 or more, then you do longitudinal studies. That's not it. It's in the form of how many times you engage with the sample or with the population. If you're doing something, a field study in a community, that's the way it is. So whether it's 1 time, you just went there once, or you went there 2 times, where you have, you go once, and then you have a program, for example, and then you go again. Okay, that's called the before and after studies. Or you went there 3 or more times. So you have a longitudinal studies. So with this one, what would be easiest is census. Okay, like mentioned before. So actually that is done every few years, right? So you keep on coming, if you are doing the census, you keep on going to the same places, the same people, okay? And you have the longitudinal data. Okay, that is the number of contacts here. Secondly is the reference period. Okay, so reference period, so usually this is either retrospective, so it's something that is already happened, okay, and you want to study that in terms of case study, for example. Okay. Or it's something prospective, Okay, you are trying to look at, okay, what are the future impacts, for example. That is prospective. Or if you're doing both, okay, you are looking at the cause and effect of something. Okay. It might be prudent to look into retrospective perspective. Right? And thirdly is nature of the investigation. Okay, this is where I think is the easiest classification that you guys can immediately familiar. Okay, first is experimental, non-experimental, and semi-experimental. Some people also mention that as quasi-experimental. Okay, those are the same things. So I will skip for this one, but basically it's telling more information about the previous things, 1 and 2 here. Okay, so if you're interested, you can always go back and look at this, right? And this is on reference period. So I will zoom in more into this one, okay, because I think a lot of you will either do experimental or non-experimental. Okay, so in here, okay, these are the classification as mentioned before. In situations where there is assumed to be cause and effect relationship, okay, there are 2 ways to study this. So look at the figure next here. Okay. If you are actually looking at what are the effect of something. Okay, what are the effect of something? And you actually have the cause. Okay, this might be a bit abstract. Okay, you can further generalize this if you put a topic here. Okay, however, just giving you an idea. Okay, the study population is the same, but you actually have the cause. Okay, maybe you want to look at the impact of, if we use the examples before with the palm oil, okay, you actually have the cause here. So maybe you want to say plantation. How do we say this one? Overplantation, is it? It's where you excessively do deforestation due to the expanding of the industry. So I will put that as overplantation. Okay. And then I want to explore the effect. Okay, so the general topic here is about deforestation. Okay, that is the big topic. Okay, and I zoom in towards the oil palm industry. Okay, and I specifically want to look at what are the impacts of this overplantation. Okay, and then because I already have this, okay, it's easy for me to do experiments, right? Whereas if we have something the other way around, okay, maybe here I want to look at specifically the deforestation, okay, because that is already what is the effect of something, but I don't know what are the causes. It can be, again, here could be one potential thing, but it can also be other things as well. Okay, so I want to explore what are the causes. What are the causes of this one? Okay, so it looks almost similar, but it depends on where you are looking at from. Yeah, whether you look at specifically from the cause and you want to study the impact, or you are looking at the impact, what is already there, and you want to find out what are the causes. So that will determine whether it's experimental or non-experimental. Okay. Right, in experimental research design, you have to link that with causal research. It always determines the cause and effect relationship. But it's not just associational. So the major differentiation between the two, it's like this one. So does smoking cause cancer? That is a causal study. Okay, when we say causal, it's also similar to cause and effect, right? Whereas if you just want to know whether they are related, they are smoking and cancer related. That is correlational. Okay. Again, this might be similar. You might ask me, like, what is the difference? It seems like it's so same. It's not. Okay. Here, it is very specific. Specific in the sense that you know already, okay, the impact is cancer, okay, and the cause is smoking. Whereas in correlational, you have these two, and you just want to check using statistical means whether these two are related. Okay, it doesn't mean that one caused the other. That is correlational. You just correlate. Okay, but you cannot determine whether A is caused by B or B is caused by A. All right. Whereas for causal, then yeah, you definitely know that already. So if we apply that to the one before, okay. Yeah. So here would be smoking. And here would be cancer. Okay, so you can start looking at that from here. So experimental study, smoking and cancer, maybe you will have rats, for example, here and rat. You have lab rats and you expose the rat to smoke and you check whether there are cancerous cells, start appearing in the rat. Okay, whereas if you are doing non-experimental study, the cancer is already there. Okay, you cannot experiment anymore whether, that person already has cancer and you ask them to smoke to check. Now, how are you going to check? Faham tak? You can understand that, right? So from here, you can only do something like, of course, like survey. So in your survey, you actually ask the people who has cancer whether they smoke, how many times a day, right? Things like that. And eventually you can start linking that up. Okay, so that's the way we look at that, the differentiation between experimental and non-experimental. All right. Okay, so what is an experiment? Experiment is a study of cause and effect. Okay, it is different from non-experimental in that we deliberately manipulate one variable. Okay. With the case of smoking just now, okay, we manipulate smoking. Okay, maybe we expose some of our samples to smoking, some does not. Okay, that means you are manipulating something. Whereas if it's non-experimental just now, you cannot manipulate anymore because the effect is already there. Okay, so that's the major differences. And we will go into the concept of what is variable. Okay, next. So just keep this in mind. What is an experiment? Okay, experiment to change one or more variables and measure the effect. Okay. So bearing that in mind, okay, in experiments, there's also many types. Okay, it can be something that is done in the lab, okay, or you go to the field, or it's a natural experiment. Okay, all three has differences. Okay, but at the very basic is you can you can look at the title actually. Okay, laboratory experiment obviously is something that is done in the lab. Okay, whereas field experiment is something that you do outside. Okay, in the field. You can still manipulate the independent variable, okay, but it is in real life setting. Okay. Whereas for natural experiment, okay, these ones are actually where you have no control whatsoever on the independent variables. Okay. It's more, if you look at, from here to here, can be something like, this is more expensive. Okay, but it is actually it has high validity because it reflects real life, actually. Okay. However, in laboratory, it's less expensive. Yeah, but it is lower in terms of ecological validity because you're doing it in an environment that is not relative to whatever is outside. In the natural setting, there's so many different factors that may affect. Okay, but in laboratory experiment, usually people start from here. Okay, because at least you can get the initial or the primary, the initial data, which you can then test in the field and later on in the natural setting. Okay. So variables, okay, recall back. Okay, what is variable? Variable is a characteristic of the situation or participant. So this depends. If your study is relates to the sample where you go out and you do your sampling. Okay, the variable is something that relates to the situation around that time. Whereas if it's people, okay, it has its own variable as well. So seeing that, for example, if you do water quality, or you are sampling some water in the lake, again, the lake behind the department. Okay, when you take your sample, you always take note of things like temperature, pH, salinity. Those are variables because it can be different. Today you went there, maybe the temperature is 32 degrees Celsius. pH is certain. Okay, and when you went there the second time to get the next sample, it may be different. All right. So that is if it's something related to water quality. But if you are, again, your sample is people, the most basic thing is like this: gender, male or female, okay, the age, right? So many different things can be variables. Okay. If it's only one value, okay, it is a constant. Okay, this is very, very basic, guys. So I hope you guys still remember. Okay, when we talk about variable, it is commonly divided into independent variables or dependent variables. Okay, and if you still recall, okay, when you do, if you do any, lab before, there's always things like control variables. So basically, independent variable is the variable that is varied or manipulated by the researcher. Okay. Easiest thing for this is, always in the lab. So in the lab, perhaps your sample is the fish, okay, from the lake behind our department. Okay, that is your sample. And your independent variable could be the temperature. So temperature in the aquarium, for example, and you can actually control that. That becomes your independent variable. Whereas if it's something that you measure, okay, that is your dependent variable. And always think about dependent variable as the effect of the independent variable. So for example, if you have, this is in the lab setting, if you have the laboratory experiment and your sample is the fish, you have your aquarium, sorry for that drawing, your study is actually to study, okay, sorry, this is your objective, to study the effect of temperature towards fish growth. Okay, so from here, you can actually think about what is your IV. Okay, here, this is IV, independent variable, and this is DV, your dependent variable. Okay. So from here, your independent variable is actually temperature, because that is what you can manipulate. Okay, this is your IV, and fish growth is actually your DV. Okay, so imagine you have 3 aquarium. Okay, sorry now, my drawing is really bad right now. Okay, one you want to test, this is 20 degrees Celsius. Oops. Okay, kejap. This is 20 degrees Celsius. Okay, this one is 25 degrees Celsius. This is 30 degrees Celsius. So know that this is the one that you manipulate. That is your temperature. And fish growth is something that you measure. So maybe along 1 month, okay, you will measure the growth of the fish. Okay. So the growth here might be, the length or the weight. It's up to you. What is exactly the variable that you are looking at, right? And for the control, maybe you want to make sure that the salinity is the same for all 3. Okay, so that is your control variable, pH. Sorry, the salinity. Okay, so far so clear, I hope. Okay, girl, you want to break? Now it's 12:20. Break ke nak proceed? Okay, macam ni.
Buat gagas doktor, kalau I proceed je kot.
Proceed je kot Okay, macam ni. We will proceed until 12:30. Okay, and then we continue back this afternoon. Okay tak? So another 9 minutes macam tu.
Okay tu doktor.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys. Okay, I know that this topic is quite heavy as well, but it's very, very important. So thank you for staying on, right? Tak nampak dah dekat chat. Okay, doktor, alright. Okay, now theory of causality and research design. So basically this one, if you Google that up, it's talking about the cause and effect lah. If we remember just now about causal study kan, so it comes back with the theory of causality. This is the theory. Okay, so why there is a need to have a control group, okay, when you do experiment. So bearing in mind, okay, it doesn't always mean that experiments are done in the lab. Okay, but you always need to have a control group. So for example, things in the field. If you are looking at specific growth or specific trees in a specific forest, okay, so you still need to have a control group if you do an experimental study. And that basically comes from the fact that, you know, even when you do things in the lab, okay, there are many variables that may affect the DV. Okay, macam just like just now, when we talk here, okay, we only say that the control is salinity. But actually, is that the only thing that will affect the growth of the fish? There are other things as well, and that is out of our control sometimes, especially imagine this one is in the lab where you can control things. Okay, but what about in a natural setting? You have no control whatsoever. Okay, you have things growing outside. It's exposed to the sunlight, exposed to rain, and you cannot control. How are you going to study the links between your IV and DV? Yeah, so that is what is this theory of causality is about. Right? So when we do a study, okay, we want to at least be able to quantify, okay, this extraneous variable. At least we have an idea. Okay, and that is why we have a control group. So control group actually has the same extraneous variable. So if we again look at the one before, okay, you have another here, okay, which is your control group. And this is where, you know, if you want to imitate things in the outside world, okay, the natural setting. So you know that you take the sample of your fish is from the lake behind our department. So you put in the average temperature. Okay, so maybe that is 24 degrees Celsius. Okay, and what is the specific pH, what is the salinity, that is the control part. Whereas for this one, you change, okay, the temperature. All right. So basically at the end of the day, you will be able to know that specifically the change in the DV, it comes from, of course, primarily from your IV. Okay, but you know already, okay, extraneous variable also has a part. Okay, and of course, because of chance. So this may also happen. If you have things like, here I already gave an example, changes in the dependent because of dependent state, okay, in questionnaire. ambiguity in research instrument. Sometimes you have the instrument, the instrument that you use, maybe the sensor are less sensitive that day. Okay, so it has like 0.1% difference between that day and other days. So that is something that falls towards chance. Okay, so you actually can quantify this one, and this one, and you can proudly say, okay, based on my study, the dependent variable is caused by the dependent variable. And when people say, how sure are you? I'm very sure because I have this and I have this quantified already. That's the only thing that you want to make sure that your result is valid, okay, and representative.